Welcome to Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana basketball news and discussion, brought to you by the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. I'm your host, Jared Morris. Join me live at assemblycall.com every Thursday night and immediately following every IU game for our live IU postgame show. And visit InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of IU basketball and to join the discussion in the Inside the Hall Premium Forum.
Hello and welcome to Podcast on the Brink. I'm Ben Ladner, and on this episode, I was joined by Sam Vecenie of The Athletic to talk IU draft prospects. We went over Romeo Langford, Juwan Morgan, even guys like Justin Smith, Damezi Anderson, Durham, and just kind of discussed where they stand as NBA prospects, their NBA futures, their IU futures, what they need to improve on, what they do well. We went really deep, especially on Romeo and Juwan, and had a really substantive discussion and went in a lot of really interesting directions, I thought. Sam was a great guest, really fun to talk to, really knows his stuff, one of the best out there, in my opinion, in terms of draft analysis, college basketball analysis, NBA analysis, just really, really overall good at his job. And so I was really happy that he was able to take the time to join. And again, I thought we had a really good conversation that spanned a lot of important ground. The Trayce Jackson-Davis news actually broke as we were recording, which is why you'll hear a little bit of confusion on my end when Sam brought that up. But we went into that a little bit kind of near the end of the podcast and talked about how he might fit not only in the NBA in 2-3 years from now, but just in IU's system under Archie Miller, how he might look as a college player, maybe what his limitations are right now as a high school player, what his biggest strengths are, and how he might improve on some of those moving forward. So it was, again, a really fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Today we are joined by Sam Vecenie of The Athletic, one of my favorite analysts out there. Sam, thanks so much for taking the time.
Ben, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. It's randomly like 65 degrees in Bloomington today. It's been like in the 20s and 30s the last week or so. So I'm enjoying this good weather. Played some basketball, went to media availability. So it's been a good day. What about you?
Oh, man, you're coming up on December and you got 65 in Bloomington? That's the dream.
It's wild. I don't think this has ever happened in my 4 years here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I went to Ohio State. I mean, hell, if it was 40 in the middle of November, I was happy as hell.
Yeah, no, I am definitely appreciating this warm weather. I didn't even have to wear my sweatshirt or anything. What day is it,
I mean, these things that we're talking about right now are why I live in Los Angeles, by the way.
Yeah, no, I definitely envy that kind of perennial good weather out there on the West Coast. And also the start times. You guys can start watching basketball 4 in the afternoon and you don't have to go to bed at 2 in the morning.
Yeah, it's pretty great. It makes my life a lot better. It took me a while. I'll say this. It took me a while to adjust to college football starting at 9 a.m. So whenever I first moved out here, I came out here probably 5.5 years ago now. I would want to go out and go to the bar and, really have a good time for the Ohio State games and stuff. And there was a bar right down the street from where I live now that was an Ohio State bar at the time. So, I would go out and I'd be drinking at 9 a.m. And I'd be what is going on right now? What have I done with my life?
That can be a rough spiral if you let it go too long.
Oh man. But now I've settled down as I hit late 20s. So we're in good shape.
Yeah, man, dude, I'm settling down as I hit early 20s.
Yeah. I will say my master's degree, I still went pretty hard, from 23, 24, first year out, I'd go to the bar pretty regularly, but 26, 27, 28, since I've moved to Hollywood, it's been a little bit more chill. I'll still go out occasionally, but it's, you settle down a little bit earlier than you think you do.
Sure. What did you get your master's in?
So I got my master's from Carnegie Mellon in 2014. It's basically an MBA in the entertainment industry. I worked at Nielsen and worked at MGM or interned at MGM realistically. Interned at Stars for a little while as well. Wow. Worked at Nielsen for a year or so. Before I started writing at all. So it was, it's not at all, but started writing professionally and started writing full time and really getting paid for it. So yeah, no, it's nice to be out here. I get to flex those muscles sometimes when people give me a call and like ask, hey, like, what do you think of this? It's, kind of a nice little benefit to have just for fun. But yeah, it's, LA, the weather is the critical point of all of this.
Yeah. I know you're into you're into movies a lot. I remember like you listened to a podcast and you and the other guest opened up with just the Oscar movies, just like a 20-minute discussion.
Oh yeah. Like it's genuinely what I used to do. Like when I was interning at Stars, I worked in film acquisition. So like the job was literally, hey, I would watch 3 movies a day and recommend to my boss, hey, you should probably watch this. Or, at MGM, when I was there, I was interning in their development department where like while it was being developed or while Fargo was in the first season of development there, they had executives up in like Calgary, watching the, production and overseeing production and making sure it was all okay. It was super cool experience, super fun, but, ultimately kind of came back to basketball at a certain point.
Yeah. So you went from watching movies to watching basketball for a living. That is not bad. The real reason I wanted to have you on this podcast, obviously we could discuss, just our lives, all day, but Indiana has a couple, maybe 3, depending on how you feel about certain guys, NBA prospects on their roster, most notably Romeo Langford, and that's probably where we'll spend the bulk of our discussion. But I wanted to have you on because, obviously you cover this stuff for a living in addition to, doing a bunch of stuff on the NBA and the league and college basketball. You kind of get that in between as well with kind of a draft focused angle where and I think, your perspective along with maybe Schmitz and Gavoni is right up there among the best. So I wanted to have you on just to kind of talk IU prospects, where these guys stand, 5-7 games into the season and kind of what they might need to improve on, what they look good doing. And obviously you've had your finger on the pulse of all these kind of high level prospects for some time now. So I think the best place to start is probably Romeo Langford, who was the number 5 recruit in the most recent class out of New Albany, Indiana, which is about 15 minutes away from Louisville. It was Mr. Basketball in Indiana, has been proclaimed the savior of IU basketball, basically since he was in high school. So I know you had him kind of just in that second tier behind Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, Cam Reddish, and Nasir Little, 3 Duke guys, 1 UNC guy, with kind of that next tier of prospects. So realistically, he's probably going to fall in that 5 to 10 range of the draft, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower, depending on how IU's season goes. But what's just kind of your general evaluation of Romeo, and how has it maybe changed since the season started?
So it's funny, I wrote a big scouting preview about Romeo. If I remember correctly, I had a nice little interaction with Jared Morris online about it and everything.
My boss.
Yeah, of course. Jared's great. We talked about it and, he thought it was pretty well done. And, it ended up being that I don't think it's rare when it happens that I wouldn't change anything about an evaluation preseason, but I think that with Romeo, it's kind of played out basically what I wrote at the time, that he's a super high level scorer, has a great feel for how to get a bucket, how to get space when he's moving off the ball, how to drive with either his right or left hand when he's on the ball, kind of a straight line driver, not much of a change of direction guy, kind of a pretty good passer, not a great passer, and then the jump shot is the question that I think everyone really has about him. Shooting 22% from 3 so far this year. I think the mechanics look okay, but within the mechanics, there are some things that kind of lead to him being more of an inconsistent shooter than you would expect based off of how pretty it looks. It's fluid. It looks like he should be a good shooter, but he jumps pretty high when he shoots the basketball, and he has this wrist bend whenever he shoots the basketball that is very, I don't want to say it's unique, people have done it before, but it's unnatural in a way that I think leads to more of his shots being contested because he's just up in the air longer and he's taking a little bit longer to load up with his jump shot. And I think there's a little bit more room for error with the wrist bend than what is typical from a good shooter. So, it's worth mentioning that when he was in the Adidas circuit in his last year, he was 74th out of 108 players to take 50 jumpers in terms of jump shot shot efficiency. It's not something that is there yet with a normal level of consistency so far for him. And that has played out so far. And, you know, I think that he's better than a 22% shooter for sure. But I don't know if he's a, you know, NBA league average shooter. I don't know if he's an average college shooter yet, even, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And, you know, you mentioned that weird wrist movement. That's what really jumped out to me as well, just being down on the court before games. And, you know, I've been to one practice and just kind of seeing it up close. It's really unusual. Like you don't see many high level prospects, especially guys who are kind of touted as shooters and scorers, guys that can score from behind the 3-point line. You don't really see that among those types of guys. And so I do think there is more margin for error, like you said, and the release just isn't as replicable as maybe a more compact, fluid, quicker jump shot might be. And so because of that, you've kind of seen him be all over the place shooting the ball. He's had several air balls on threes this year. He's hit a couple really nice shots. He's moving to his right, moving to his left. He's able to hit shots off the dribble from the mid range. It just hasn't really been there from three, and he's only getting up a little under 5 attempts per 40. Which, you know, Indiana doesn't shoot a ton of threes in the first place, but I'd like to see that number go a little bit higher, even if the shots aren't necessarily going in, because you have to feel like at a certain point it will round out. I think, you know, we've seen I mentioned his range of possible outcomes being in that kind of 5 to 10, maybe 12 range of the draft. And I think we've seen reason to buy into both sides of that spectrum, right? Where he's really great getting to the basket, and he's fluid off the dribble. You mentioned, I think that's right, that he doesn't change directions particularly well, but he changes speeds really nicely. Yep. And he looks like he's just kind of coasting, but then he's by you. And so he's able to get into the lane, get into the basket. He's got a nice floater game, able to use the glass, gets to the foul line a ton. But then on the other side of that, you see the 3-point shooting that hasn't really been there. And so for him, is it just kind of proving himself as a shooter, proving that he can knock down that shot with consistency? As far as just getting him closer to that top 5 range as opposed to maybe the back end of the lottery?
Yeah, I think that is the biggest swing point with him right now, is he needs to prove that he can be an effective jump shooter, an effective catch and shoot guy at the very least. Because even if he's an effective catch and shoot guy, he has enough off the dribble to really be able to attack closeouts, to space the floor. And then in an NBA that obviously has a more spaced floor in general, just because the offensive zone is bigger, because the 3-point line is further back, let alone there being better shooters in the NBA as well. It's going to open up the floor for him a lot and be able to, you know, get the most out of that dribble drive game and out of that straight line drive game. Because as you said, Indiana, I mean, they just don't shoot a ton of threes. It's not even like an Indiana thing. It's an Archie Miller thing. Like Archie's offense just doesn't generate a crazy amount of threes. If you look back through his past, I mean, there's a nice like 4-year stretch at Dayton where they were right around the national average in 3-point attempt percentage. But, you know, both years at Indiana, it's been not crazy high in terms of how many threes they shoot. So, you know, it is what it is. And, you know, I think that the good that Archie has done for Romeo's game is readily apparent. I mean, if you watched Romeo defend in AAU and in high school, as I'm sure maybe you did, I didn't really watch him in high school other than highlights. I watched him in the AAU circuit. There was no accountability. Like he didn't defend anyone. He didn't try to fight through screens. He didn't try and like really sit down and defend anyone, but he always had the tools and he always had the toughness, and, you know, he plays hard. There's nothing questionable there. So you wondered that if once he got with Archie, it would work out a little bit better. And I think he's been much, much better defensively than what he was at the AAU circuit at the very least. I mean, he's still a freshman that's played 7 games in college basketball so far. So he's not going to be a perfect defender, but I like what I've seen there in terms of the signs that, hey, maybe this guy can be a useful 2-way player.
Yeah. And that was maybe the biggest question surrounding him going into the year, was just, is he going to be able to defend consistently? You know, how good is he going to be able to use those tools? And I think Archie Miller is a really good defensive coach. And at the very least, you know, I have some disagreements with his scheme and kind of the things that he does as far as guarding ball screens. But at the very least, he's going to get the guys to buy in and get them to play hard on that end of the floor. And Romeo, I think maybe the biggest surprise in his game, other than maybe the low 3-point shooting, is his defensive instincts are actually really good. Like he knows how to get into passing lanes. He's able to read guys' eyes really well, comes up with a lot of steals, great length, able to get into a lot of those passing lanes and just, you know, get the ball going the other way. And Indiana's a pretty good transition team when they can get going in that mode. So I think the instincts have been a positive indicator there. he probably tops out as maybe a league average NBA defender, but being 6'6", being pretty strong, pretty long, I think he's got some defensive versatility there that in the modern NBA, as guys are looking for players who can defend multiple positions, I don't know that he's going to be a 3 or 4 position defender, but he could be maybe a 2 or 3 position defender on the wing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that he can, maybe slide down to the perimeter 4s at some point that, populate lineups now. You're not going to want to switch him on to Jaren Jackson or anything like that. But, some of the guys.
Jaren Jackson's probably a 5,
right.
3 years from now.
Right. But right now he's playing the 4 at Memphis.
Right. Yeah.
You probably don't want to switch him onto Danilo Gallinari out here in LA because Danilo is such a polished post game and he's pretty physical and strong. But, someone like a Harrison Barnes, maybe you could switch him onto a Harrison Barnes. Guys like that, I think it makes sense to be able to, switch across the lineup. I think that maybe he could even guard some bigger ones. Maybe he's not going to be a great defender there, but if he gets caught on an island in a switch scenario, it's not going to be the worst thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
That's really the key. You just need to be able to stand up in these situations, right? And not just get destroyed. I think that overall, when I wrote about Romeo in the preseason, what I said was I had him at number 6 overall. And the problem was though that the reason I had him at 6 is because this is just not a deep draft, right?
Right.
I felt more comfortable with him in the back end of the lottery than I did as a top 5, top 6, top 7, top half of the lottery guy. And so far that's basically where I'm at. I probably will drop him a little bit on my board. I'm probably going to have him more 8 or 9 in the update that's coming, but yeah, I think he's still a really good player, and I think he's still probably a one and done guy. And we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me, my roommates and friends, you think he's gonna stay more than 1 year? And I'm just kind of look at him no, unless he gets injured or at least has a terrible season. He's almost definitely going to be a one and done guy. And I think no matter where he's drafted, he's teams are looking at him as kind of an offensive player. We talked about the defense. It's nice if he can do that, but his role is going to be more of an offensive one. So I'm wondering how you see him, let's say in his prime when he's 26, 27 years old. What sort of role do you see him taking on in an offense? Is he a first option on a good team? Second option on a good team, first option on a bad team? Where does he kind of fall as far as just being a go-to scorer, maybe a facilitator at the NBA level?
Yeah, I think he's more of a third option in the NBA. I think he's more of a guy that, again, you can put the ball in his hands a little bit, and he can facilitate, and he's a good passer, and he can kind of drive straight line and change speeds and do what he has to. You're probably going to want to run more side pick and rolls as opposed to middle pick and rolls with him. But again, I don't know that you're talking about a guy that is an elite NBA scorer, and that's his bread and butter. You know what I mean? That's right. What I think is a little bit scary right now. And, you talk to NBA folks around, front offices, and they're not real sure yet what he is either. Again, we're 7 games in. It's a very fluid process. So I look at him. I've always thought of him more as a, potential average starter at his peak. And I think that's totally fine. That's a great outcome for him. He'll make $100 million being a third, fourth option in the NBA as a starter if he is. So that's not to denigrate what he's really, really good at and what he's capable of. It's just to say hey, I don't think he is as good of an NBA prospect as he is a college quote unquote savior of Indiana basketball.
Right. And I think, I think that's probably spot on. I think at best he's maybe a second option on a playoff team, but not a title contender. That best case scenario. And I think that makes the shooting concerns maybe a little bit more prevalent, because if he's not going to be your number one guy, if he's not going to have the ball in his hands all the time, you need him to be able to space the floor and knock down shots when guys kick him the ball. And if he's only kind of this secondary playmaker, some of that value is mitigated a little bit if he can't really keep defenses honest and space the floor.
Yeah, no question. I think that the jump shot is without doubt the biggest swing skill that he has right now. He has to be able to shoot it at least a 35% 3-point clip. It doesn't necessarily have to come this year. Like if it doesn't come this year, that's probably okay. I think an NBA team will still select him based off the fact that he's 6'6" and has great scoring instincts and a 6'11" wingspan, and he's taken time to develop his game defensively. Like, there's a lot there to really, really like for him as a scorer and as an overall player right now. But if the jump shot doesn't come, he's a bench player in the NBA, I think, like realistically. You have to be able to shoot from the wing in the NBA.
Yeah. And, the more I think about it, I've been trying to come up with like an NBA comp for him. I think the closest I've gotten is like Karis LeVert.
Yeah,
I think that's actually. Does he remind you of anyone in the NBA?
I think Karis is actually kind of spot on because he can go around ball screens. He has a really good feel in those. He has good feel for moving off the ball. But the thing is, Karis was a 40% 3-point shooter in college. He's been a little bit worse than that in the NBA. But like Karis, I think is kind of spot on in a lot of ways in terms of what his ceiling is. And by the way, like everyone was super excited about Karis this year. I was, it was a huge bummer that he is hurt right now. And I hope that he can, continue to get healthy. But like people were talking about him as like a future potential all-star. And I don't really see that for him. I think he's still more of like a third starter on a good team, which is exactly what we're talking about with Romeo Langford. Yeah,
I think so. And also worth noting that, he only played like 12 games before he got injured. So I think there was probably some regression to the mean coming for him. And, the injury, it obscures some of that just because, he was playing so well and you hate to see a guy like that go out. But yeah, I think not only in terms of role, but just kind of how they move on the court. I think both guys are good at changing speeds. Karis is probably a little more shifty than Romeo is right now, but he's also been in the league for a while and, didn't quite have as much of that.
College player, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And injuries, have contributed to that as well. He's just kind of been a chronic, foot, lower body kind of injury prone kind of guy, which is a shame because he had that foot injury at Michigan. Unless you have anything else to add on Romeo, we can move on to some of the other guys, notably Juwan Morgan. Unless you've got anything else.
No, I don't really. We can kind of push forward.
Yeah. So Juwan Morgan, you had him 73 on your last board, which was on November 5th. So and I'm coming out with a new one, I presume, fairly soon. He's averaging
probably next week on that for what it's worth.
Okay. We'll definitely look forward to that then. He's averaging about 24 points and 12 rebounds per 40 with just under 4 assists per game. I remember you said on the Real GM Radio podcast with Danny LaRue maybe a month or so ago that he does everything else. He just has to shoot it. Is that kind of still where you're at with him? He's shooting 56% on 16 attempts. So he's 9 of 16, not a good enough sample size to say for sure that he's a good 3-point shooter, but he looks a little bit better in that area this year. Are you buying into that? Where might he fall maybe in the next big board?
Oh, he'll probably stay right around where he is. I want to see more from the jump shot. I mean, he's done everything that you would expect from him. I've always thought that his passing ability is not indicative of what his assist numbers have been. Yes. I think he's actually a really good passer, and he hasn't yet averaged over an assist and a half a game over his 3 years. He's up at 2.6 right now, which I think is more in line with where he is as a passer. Keeps the ball moving. And I think a lot of last year, he obviously played a ton of center where he was asked to be the primary scoring hub. So good passer, obviously tough. Like he is capable to move down to that center spot despite being 6'7" and what is he now, like 220, 225 maybe?
He's about 225, 230 maybe.
Yeah, so like he's not what he was coming out of high school where he's probably 200 pounds, but he's not exactly a big guy down there either. Good offensive rebounder, which that's a place where he derives a lot of his offensive value, and that's not a place where the NBA is looking to, really capitalize on a guy, especially that will probably play the 3 or the 4. Just an efficient player though. He knows how to score around the basket. He knows how to get his separation that he needs to. He can put the ball on the deck a little bit. Has a developed post game where he can take advantage of mismatches. Like I said, good passer. He's a multi-positional defender, due to his size and athleticism. I think he has like a 6'10" wingspan, like something in that range. It's not overly long. So, I look at everything he can do and I say, hey, this guy is probably tailor-made for like a 2-way contract next year in the NBA. And let him develop that jump shot consistency even more. And let's see where it goes from here. Because right now I don't really think he's an NBA player without the jump shot, but with it, things change for him a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. If he can maybe play that 5 spot regularly in the NBA, maybe the jump shot, because he still needs it, but maybe it becomes a little less imperative because you can put other shooters around him and not rely on him spacing the floor for you. But obviously it helps. And he's, like you said, not quite big enough to be like a full-time backup 5. He probably needs to play the 4 for most of his minutes. Not, he's not going to be a starter or anything right out of the gate, and maybe not ever. But I think in most of his playing time on the floor, he's probably better as a 4. But the way the league's going, maybe he's got the size and could maybe play in some of those small ball lineups. And his feel has really stood out, I think, all 3 years that he's been at Indiana. Even as a freshman, they had him like running point guard with backup units sometimes when Yogi Ferrell was out of the game. And his passing, I think it's true that the assist numbers have not always been indicative, but I also think this season he's gotten even better in that regard. And also worth noting, Indiana had no shooting on their team last season. So a lot of those passes that he was making, guys just weren't hitting shots. But this season, they've got Evan Fitzner, they've got Zach McRoberts is shooting a little bit more. So they've got guys that can shoot, and he's looked really good passing out of the post. But again, that's because he's the first or second option on offense most of the time. And, he's getting those opportunities to have the ball in his hands and to really make those reads more so than he would in the NBA. So I think I'm with you. I think it's all about the jump shot. I'm also tentative about buying in this early in the year because he changed up his mechanics a little bit prior to this season, and I don't think it looks quite as good as it did last season, even though the early results are a little bit better. So I'm a little wary of that. That's definitely something that I'll be tracking as the season goes on, and I think he probably, if not definitely, will come down from that 56% mark. But he's just a player you want to root for. The toughness, like you said, is there. He competes. I think being assertive is something that kind of waxes and wanes for him. He'll come out of halftime some games and just completely go at the other team's center and dominate and score 8 early points out of the gate. And then sometimes he kind of takes it easy in the first half or the second half and kind of floats out there. So it depends just on the consistency of the effort there as far as his college production. But yeah, no, I think that jump shot is really the key, unless you have anything else to say on him.
Not really, I don't think. I mean, I would like for him to succeed. I mean, I love guys that kind of come up from he was like right around like top 100, top like 125 recruit in his recruiting class.
According
if I remember correctly.
His basketball reference page, he was not in the RSCI top 100.
So let's see if we can pull up 24/7. Because does RSCI go to like 150 or something, right?
Possibly.
Here, so he was 117 in the 24/7 Sport composite. So yeah, like guys like him and that really work their way up and really battle. I love guys like that you know, improve throughout every single year of their 4 years, and he's been a great example of that.
Yeah, and he was part of that freshman class with OG Anunoby and Thomas Bryant under Tom Crean. So he was more of a Crean guy, but is definitely fit into Archie Miller's system with the defensive toughness, kind of the versatility. I think that I'd actually like to see him defend a little bit more on the perimeter. Indiana doesn't do much switching. Yeah. And I think Morgan and a lot of guys on this team have the ability to defend out on the perimeter. They just don't really get the opportunity to do it very often. And, I think they're well suited to switch a little bit more. And I think Juwan Morgan's a guy that can do that as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% right.
So those are kind of the two most prominent guys on this team, and we can move quickly through anyone else. Do you have any thoughts on?
You mentioned a third. I'm interested to hear who your third is.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on Justin Smith?
He's intriguing. He has a really good frame, obviously. 6'7", seems pretty long. Do you have a wingspan on that? Because I don't off the top of my head.
I think it's maybe 6'11" ish. Yeah. I don't think he's OG Anunoby long, but he's decent.
Yeah, I'd have guessed like +4, +5. Like he's pretty long. Doesn't really shoot yet, but has some defensive versatility. He doesn't seem super comfortable with the ball in his hands yet. Like he makes kind of rash decisions with the ball pretty regularly. The decisions that you wouldn't, like to see from a guy that is playing kind of a low usage role, within Indiana's offense, even though like this year he's actually been more high usage than what I anticipated.
Yeah.
He's currently taking a slightly larger percentage of possessions for Indiana than what Juwan Morgan is. I don't know. He has the frame. He's really just got to develop offensively and be more than just like a play finisher. He has to shoot it. He has to, be able to not turn the ball over when he touches the ball consistently. He has a long way to go. Like, he's someone that I'll track over the next like 2 years or so, but there's still a ways.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you. I was super high on Justin Smith coming into the year, and I've backed down on that significantly since. He has bad tunnel vision. I mean, he gets the ball and he goes to the basket, and it's unlikely that he'll ever pass out of a drive unless he's absolutely stonewalled by 2 or 3 defenders and is forced to pass. And even then, he might put up a fadeaway floater or something like that, shot that you don't really want him taking. He's kind of experimented with the 3, but hasn't really made it a part of his game yet.
Yeah.
He is a versatile defender, I think. And I actually thought he did a decent job on Zion Williamson in that Duke game. Zion still got his regardless, but Smith was able to stay in front, uses his chest. He's a really strong guy, uses physicality and kind of make things difficult for Zion to an extent that the other Indiana defenders really couldn't. So I'm intrigued by that. His versatility, his athleticism. He's got a 48-inch max vertical leap, which was an Indiana record this past summer. Just can absolutely get off the ground.
That seems high for what it's worth.
I mean, when you see him get up like in warm-ups and stuff, it's pretty close. I would say he can really get off the floor.
I will say 48 inches would be the combine record if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I'll be surprised if he does that.
Right. And for listeners, this is with a running start rather than just off of a standing 2 feet. But yeah, he can. I think there's a video of it out there somewhere.
He can leap for sure.
Looking to. What's that?
He can leap for sure, no question. He's good, very good.
And he does it. He can do it effortlessly when he gets the space. He can get up and just kind of glide through the air. But obviously, that doesn't always translate to production on the floor. So yeah, he's been kind of a disappointing player to me this season, frankly, just because I expected him to be a little bit more versatile offensively, be a little bit better cog in that machine. That 24 usage rate, I think, is too high for him. And he's not the greatest passer. He doesn't rebound as consistently as you'd want him to for a power forward. He kind of is one gear or no gear as far as his effort. He's either just attacking and absolutely barreling towards the basket, but when you ask him to dial it back and maybe make better decisions, it seems like he has a tendency to kind of disengage. And he's another guy that can float at times. And he actually got pulled out of the Arkansas game for basically the entire second half because Archie Miller just felt like he wasn't really bringing it enough. And he did that a little bit against Duke as well with 5 turnovers, just has trouble asserting himself when he's not just going 100%. And so to me, he needs to find that happy medium a little bit better, just as far as being a decision maker and kind of understanding where to pick his spots rather than going 100 miles an hour all the time. Yeah,
for sure. Again, like a guy to track more than a guy to really get your hopes up about, I would say. Some evaluators really liked Clifton Moore going into last year as like kind of a sneaky guy. I never really bought into that, but
yeah,
I think
I have not bought into him since his freshman year, to be honest. He's a stretch 4 that can't really shoot, in my opinion. He just doesn't. Yeah. He doesn't have great mechanics. He shoots kind of a knuckleball from distance. He's not strong. He's kind of skinny. To me, I've heard a couple people say that a lot of these kind of D3 small time D1 coaches are just waiting for him to transfer and get out on that market so they can scoop him up because he'd be a really good player in like American University and could be successful there. But as far as an NBA future, I don't really see that.
No, I'm with you on that one. I've never really 100% gotten that vibe. Al Durham, kind of pops a little bit. Like, again, not a real like super high level prospect necessarily because he's still 6'4", but like he defends and he is shooting reasonably well from 3 this year. I think he's at like 41%, something like that.
42, 43 sure.
Actually. He didn't shoot it this well last year, so we'll see if the shooting stabilizes much in the same way that we're hoping for positive regression from Romeo. We have to see where Durham's shooting kind of settles in after a lot of attempts, but if he can shoot it, okay, let's see that.
Yeah.
Not really a Durham Davis guy for the NBA. He's just a big-bodied, big man that's an undersized center.
I agree.
Sneaky guy that I've always really liked throughout the recruiting process is Damezi Anderson, 6'7" wing who can shoot threes, and he's not much of a defender yet, but has a little bit of length. He's like a 6'10" wingspan guy. Multi-year player, no question at all about that. Definitely a rotational guy right now that you hope develops into a starter at Indiana, hopefully by year 2, realistically for him, after Romeo leaves and Juwan leaves. Like, you hope that he can, and Fitzner obviously is playing a ton of minutes too. You hope that a guy like him can step in and be like kind of maybe a 3-4 player that can step into the starting lineup and really be a consistent 3-point shooter. Yeah, I've always kind of sneaky liked him. I thought he was a little bit underrated by recruiting services, because he was another guy that was like, in that 100 to like 125 range that I thought was a little bit better than that.
That's interesting, because I don't really know what to think of him at this point. He came into the Chicago State game and hit 4 threes, and it was kind of like, oh, okay, this guy can do something. But you look at his shot; he's got a funky shot. He kind of splays his fingers out and doesn't have like the cleanest follow through. It's just kind of a push shot without much of a jump. And so if he can shoot that consistently, it doesn't always matter what it looks like as long as it goes in. We'll see on him. To me, there are times when he's just kind of a guy who's out there and isn't really doing much, especially when he's not hitting shots. And he has a tendency as well to kind of force things. He posts up a lot and tries to make plays out of that, which he's, not the best at. He was playing a little bit kind of in the rotation early on in the year, didn't really play against Duke. So we'll see if that was a one-game thing or if that's more of a trend moving forward. But I think definitely a multi-year guy, worth tracking. We'll see if he's got the athleticism, and particularly if it translates on the defensive end, because he's gotten chewed out a couple times by Archie this year, just not being in the right place, not really knowing when or where to rotate. So he's got to figure some of that stuff out. But yeah, definitely a name worth throwing out there. What do you think about Rob Phinisee? Because to me, he kind of screams 4-year college player and then like backup NBA point guard. Yeah,
maybe backup long-term NBA point guard. Obviously has a super high feel for the game. He's been a little turnover prone so far for Indiana, but 7-game freshman. We should probably not go too crazy worrying about that. I love the way that he distributes the ball. I love the way that he is capable of getting Indiana into its offense. That's, it's hard for freshmen to do that. And he is one of those guys who just has like kind of uncommon feel for the game, but I don't know. We'll see. He's one of those guys that like doesn't have a lot of physical tools. So he really has to become probably a 40% 3-point shooter to make it work. And he probably needs to be like an elite guy getting into passing lanes and really, starting transition offense quickly. And it's a long way to go for Rob Phinisee. I think he's going to be a really, really good 4-year player for Indiana. Yeah. It's just, there's not a lot of tools there. It's all heart and it's all IQ based, and that's totally fine. There are guys who make it that way, but it's, right now that's where we're at, and it's going to take some time to really watch him develop into it.
Yeah. And I think the natural comparison for Indiana fans would be Yogi Ferrell, another guy, 4-year college player, and, kind of scraped by into the NBA as a backup point guard. And now, obviously isn't really playing much for the Kings, but that would be kind of the path. But that was really Yogi's like 95th percentile outcome. And that was kind of, maybe not something you should expect from every, 6-foot stocky Indiana point guard who's unheralded out of high school.
Well, and the thing is that, we talk about how with Rob Phinisee, he has to become an elite shooter, right? Yogi Ferrell, 40% from 3 as a sophomore, 42% as a junior, 42% as a senior, basically all on like pull-ups too.
Yeah.
If Phinisee can really start to put pressure on the defense with those pull-up jumpers like that, hey, I mean, that's how you make it in the NBA right now. I would say the most important skill in the NBA as a point guard, lead guard, is being able to get separation from your opponent. The second one to me now is not passing anymore. It's being able to put pressure on the defense with a pull-up jumper, because it's just so hard to guard that. So, if Rob Phinisee can do that, there is a real place for him at the NBA level, but it's really difficult to get to the point where you're a 42% 3-point shooter consistently.
Yeah. And, time will tell if he gets there. Obviously, probably 3 years to figure that out for him. So we'll see. We're getting into kind of the range of maybe
we're deep
the long
in the
shots
weeds,
of
man.
the roster.
We're way in the weeds. I love it.
Yeah, probably deeper than we need to be. So unless you've got anything else to add on any of these guys, maybe it's Romeo, anyone else we discussed.
Well, should we talk about Jackson-Davis?
Sure. Yeah.
He just
What
committed,
do you think of him?
Yeah, it's probably worth it. I mean, he's top 20 recruit, 5-star prospect. I do think he's a multi-year player. Kid that's like, if I remember correctly, like 6'9", 6'10", +4, +5 wingspan in that range. Kind of a bigger kid, as opposed to a kid that's like super bouncy and super athletic. Kind of not like a wild explosive kid, but a more fluid athlete than explosive athlete. Jumper has potential, not quite there yet. He's a lefty, not like a knockdown 3-point shooter, probably not even a knockdown mid-range jumper yet, but it's coming. He's improving. And I think that by year 2, if you told me he was able to step away and shoot some threes, I wouldn't be surprised. He's not like a great lateral quickness guy, which scares me for his long-term NBA game, but it's obviously a great commitment for Archie Miller, who's going to know how to use this guy, basically to a T. It's exactly the kind of center that Archie Miller is, I think, really, really looking for. And, obviously it's always good for Indiana to keep Indiana kids in state too.
Maybe there's a little bit of Juwan Morgan in there, just in the sense of he's kind of an undersized, he plays like a center, but he's a little undersized to kind of.
He's more of a true center though. Like Juwan is like a way undersized center. Jackson-Davis is like more of a, this guy is probably big enough to be a college center. He's 6'9". His arms are super long. That's the big thing. Like he has a +5 wingspan. So he is more of a true center at the college level, at least. In the NBA, he's definitely an undersized center, but.
Right. And that's the question, is whether he's going to be able to be versatile enough to play different positions in the NBA, or, again, if every center in the NBA is 6'9", by the time he gets there, it's less of a problem.
Yeah.
And that seems to be kind of the way the league's trending. So, yeah, I mean, the jump shot, again, it's kind of what we've been saying with all these guys. It's a huge, obviously it's what NBA teams are looking for nowadays, and it's going to be a huge kind of barometer for most of these guys. I agree. I think he's got the physical tools. He's obviously,
I will say this, the physical tools are what worry me somewhat with him, just because he's like,
really?
He's just not like a super athlete on the perimeter. You know what I mean? He's not like, he's undersized and is not like a crazy lateral quickness guy right now, who can like step away and guard pick and rolls, and who can step away. And, if he's caught on an island against a wing, I think he'd probably still struggle with that. Again, so young, super, super young. Yeah. So we hope that he can get there, but from a size and length perspective, that's there at least. It's more, the quickness and everything that I think is going to have to really get there at some point.
Yeah. And a lot of guys kind of make that jump during college. They spend time in a college weight room, and they get quicker, they get stronger, they get leaner, they're able to be kind of more agile and versatile in that sense. Mm-hmm. So tough to know what he's going to kind of look like and what he rounds into, because like you said, he is probably a multi-year college player. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. Like Indiana fans will probably be pretty happy to hear that. I do think he's probably like a 2 or 3 year guy. Again, this 2019 recruiting class is one of the weakest that I can remember. Even as someone who followed recruiting before I did this professionally. Like this is a very weak class. He's a top 20 kid in this class, but I don't know what he would have been in past classes, but it certainly wouldn't have been top 20 at the very least.
That's kind of the sense I get when I see his highlights. I'm like, this guy is a top 10, whatever, 16, whatever he is. It kind of is underwhelming in comparison to previous classes.
Yeah. And look, like, I don't mean to like guy or anything, he's good. He's a very, very good. He's a very polished player.
Yeah.
But, from an NBA perspective, I think he's definitely a multi-year guy.
Yeah, that's one of the tough things with these high school bigs is it's so easy to be great as a high school big man because you're just bigger. I think Deron Davis is like this too. You're just bigger than everybody. And then when it gets to turning yourself into an NBA player, a lot of the things that make for a great high school or college big man just aren't really what NBA teams are looking for. And so that jump, that translation can be difficult for a lot of guys.
Yeah, for sure. No question there.
So unless you've got anything else, that's all I've got. I think we covered a lot of really good ground here, went in depth on a lot of these guys. Your insight is always appreciated, always valued. I think, like I said earlier, you're one of the absolute best in the business. One of my favorite Twitter follows, one of my favorite college and NBA writers. So I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. I mean, if you want to hang out and talk about Indiana's basketball season, we can do that too. Like I was tentatively in on Indiana, coming into the year, but
all right,
we'll see. They need to be able to get it done on the road. And I love what they did against Marquette, but you got to be able to go into Bud Walton and beat an Arkansas team that is not super, super hot, I would say.
Yeah. I think they struggle with athletic teams. That's kind of been the theme that's popped to me is Duke and Arkansas, both really heavy pressure kind of defensive teams. And Indiana just got sped up and didn't really know what to do with that athleticism.
Yeah. I'm going to be really interested with their game, not necessarily against Northwestern tomorrow. We're recording this on November 30th on Friday.
Yep.
So they play I don't know when you're going to release this, but I figured I'd leave a, kind of note of when this is happening.
That'll be up to Jared and Alex.
The games that I'm really interested in because of that are Penn State. Penn State's a really athletic team, and it's going to be on the road. It's going to give them another test. Louisville's at home, but they're another athletic team that can really pressure you. And then Butler is a neutral site game, and Butler is a really solid, just well-coached group more than anything. But they're not the athletes that the previous two teams are, which I think kind of actually plays a little bit into Indiana's hands slightly. I would probably pick Indiana to beat Butler, despite the fact that Butler is off to a great start. I'm going to be really interested though. This is a fascinating Indiana team that has an awful lot of talent, and I'm excited to see where they go.
Yeah, it's cool to have a team to cover that is genuinely talented and not a massive disappointment like it was last year. So real quick before we go, tell everyone, all the listeners, where they can find you and keep up with you.
So after you rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, I would suggest that you go rate, review, and subscribe to the Game Theory podcast over on iTunes, SoundCloud, wherever you get suboptimal podcasting content, in my case. Go to The Athletic, go subscribe to The Athletic. I just wrote about Bull earlier today. I'll have that top 100 board early next week, as Ben and I just talked about. But, other than that, just go to Sam_Vecenie on Twitter, and you'll see a lot of stream of consciousness thoughts.
I will add one of the better Twitter follows out there, just as far as the insight, the humor, the analysis. Always good stuff coming out of there. And of course, The Athletic, which I've been a subscriber now for 2 years, and it's been worth every penny. Just the team of writers they put together over there, kind of unbelievable. And I promise I'm not saying this just because I want to get hired by The Athletic after I graduate. I really do mean it.
It's so funny. Like I was, yesterday they tweeted out like a thing of, like all the writers, like subscribe to the NBA site for The Athletic. You can go read Shams and David Aldridge and Sam Amick and, all these people. And then it's my name in there. And I'm just like, oh, this is a joke. Like, are we kidding me right now? This is unbelievable. We've been incredibly lucky with who we've been able to lure, and it makes it all the better for you guys to go subscribe to The Athletic.
Yes, absolutely recommend that. Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yep, anytime, man.
If you want to support Podcast on the Brink, here is the single best way to do it. Tell anyone you know who loves IU hoops about us and suggest that they subscribe. Podcast on the Brink can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are available. Tell your social media followers, email your friends, text your family members. For weekly discussion about IU basketball, they need to be subscribed to Podcast on the Brink. We'll talk to you next time. Go Hoosiers.